Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
That's love.
It's deeper than love. And I love that man. And he loves me
As
too.
you should. You don't gotta pretend with me. Ain't no way! That girl is too spicy. She fucking that man, but...
Okay, so they're having the bachelorette party and the bachelor parties, and Amy just said that she and Johnny have not had sex yet. She implied they're doing other things, and they're not having sex because of the concerns with getting pregnant, and everyone seems like they're happy, but AD is either joking or thinking that maybe Amy is just not wanting to talk about it and they're actually having sex. I don't know. Given the way that they were talking on camera, it doesn't surprise me that they haven't had sex, and we've already been over that. So I thought I would go over some of the things that my contact on the show told me about Clay and AD before we move forward, because I read that email and I want to make sure that this is out there so that you know, or at least where I'm coming from in terms of my reactions to things. And also, I think it's really interesting information. Now, I can't know if any of this is accurate. It's also through one person's filter. There's all that. But I appreciate having this individual who works on the show because it really fleshes things out. I'm always wanting to know as close to the accurate data as possible so that when I talk about what is happening or what it might be exhibiting, that I have a better idea as to what's happening, so I can, you know, talk about psychological concepts. Also, if you've ever been a student or a supervisee of mine, you know that I'm a stickler for data. I will occasionally have a student or a supervisee, and I don't blame them because they're at the beginning of their career or their knowledge about this, but when I ask them what their hypothesis is or the conceptualization of a client is, sometimes I will hear novice clinicians say phrases like, well, I feel like the kid has ADHD. And so I don't humiliate the student, but I will say, well, I don't, especially if they write it. If they say it, sometimes, you know, I feel like that can mean a lot of different things. But if they write it in their assessment that they turn into me, especially if it's in the client file, I will mark it up severely. I say, there are no feelings in conceptualization. There's no you feel, you know. You don't want a physician to say, yeah, I kind of feel like you have cancer. You don't want to hear that. You want to hear someone say, here is the data, and here is the indication. Here is my hypothesis about this. Of course, I need more information, but there are signs that this hypothesis might prevail in the end, that kind of language. And, you often hear me talking about, I'm often looking through the edit. I'm trying to imagine what really happened. So this helps along those lines. So what my contact said, I asked her specifically about AD and Clay, and she starts off by saying, Clay, 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 Clay. She says, he is getting a much better edit than I thought he would. Most of his red flags happened off camera. So you heard me earlier talk about how my contact said that there was a big fight between AD and Clay before that soup situation, maybe two, but at the very least one, that was on camera. And why would they leave that out? So it looks like there are even more things. So going on, he had mood swings and was either super cool and kind or moody and difficult to work with. And that's not hard to imagine, given the little bit that we've seen. He was caught having lunch with a female when he said he couldn't film, although we don't know if anything was going on with that female or not. Okay, hard to know what that means. Could have been a friend, but it also could have been something else. But we can only speculate on speculation. I know he was deeply affected by his dad taking him on what he refers to as infidelity trips. So it sounds like he talked about it more often than is being showed, which makes sense, because I don't remember him referring to it as that. I've heard that post-filming, he has been in therapy and is doing much better in general. Oh, that's great. Well, let's go on. So I asked my contact about AD, and specifically I asked if AD seemed to turn off her agency when with men, because with Matthew and with Clay, it kind of looked like AD's agency and assertiveness was heavily subdued. There were times when AD came across as very assertive, very independent, and able to speak her mind. She has a lot of strengths. We have seen her be upfront even with Clay when they were talking about the gym. That was one of their first fights, if you will. And I thought AD was, she handled it pretty well. She was telling him, that's not very nice. She was saying it in a way that was not aggressive or hostile, but also absolutely pointing it out. And that gave me a lot of optimism, because if it's going to work, he might need that. And she, of course, deserves to say those sorts of things. As time has gone on, that assertiveness has seemingly waned, at least in my eyes. And either she enters into this I will follow mode, which I've already been over, or she's just quietly angry. And I don't blame her if what we're hearing is accurate, because it can be hard to, what else is she supposed to do, AD? But we also saw it with Matthew, I thought. I don't know how many, I have a feeling not many people saw it that way, but when AD was in the pods with Matthew, and Matthew was being confronted lightly by AD for what he had done, it looked like she was easily manipulated or convinced or persuaded by his very ham-fisted method of trying to distract her or something. I won't go over that again, but I thought AD was just, at the very least, would do what Amber did and just walk away. So there's that. But anyway, so I asked if behind the scenes there's more data showing that AD might have turned her agency off with these two men. And what my contact said is, I absolutely believe AD does turn off her agency to Clay regularly, and that's a great way to put it. She, on one hand, can be very strong, and she can be very fierce, but she loses that a lot to her infatuation with Clay. Yeah, it does kind of look like that. She does seem to be very in love with him, or infatuation, that might be a better word. I think she was in love with the idea of being with him. She did really build him up when he was having doubts of whether he was worthy of love. I think she wanted to prove that to him so incredibly much that her needs took a back seat. That's interesting. She also never saw a healthy view of marriage from her own parents. Okay. I don't think we knew that specifically. I think we heard details along those lines. She wanted to prove to him so incredibly much that she put herself aside. That's interesting. That kind of points to that codependency, that fix-a-hoe stuff. That when people are overfunctioners, one of the mechanisms that can keep them engaged is they were printified, they were pressured to take care of others. Their mission in life is to solve someone else's problems, which means that if they date someone or meet someone that doesn't have problems, they actually won't really engage very much with that person, which is self-sabotaging to the codependent overfunctioner. And so they need to find someone with issues, and then they proceed to engage in trying to solve those problems. The other problem is that if they actually do help the person solve their problems, they don't have that relationship anymore, and they will either try to get the person to have problems again or try to sabotage the individual from actually improving, or they will sabotage, or they will underfunction themselves. Sometimes that will happen. Anyway, so it's possible that given that whole scenario, that whole hypothesis, that she's interfacing with Clay, interacting with him, and a part of her overfunctioning is, of course, to put herself aside, which overfunctioners often do, their own needs aside. Sometimes that's not very hard for them to do because very few people paid attention to their needs, and so they don't really have a good sense of that, or if they do, they don't believe they deserve to have those focused on, even for themselves. But they will also just be single-mindedly doing everything in their power to quote-unquote solve the problem in the underfunctioner. And if she identified the problem, which wouldn't be hard to identify, that he has a psychological trauma related to his early childhood that I am now going to fix. And the only way I can fix it is if I fully love and accept him in a way that he wasn't loved and accepted when he was young. I need to show him that he is lovable. And that is a wonderful altruistic goal, but of course, if it's in the sacrifice of you, then you're not doing anyone any good, really. So I wonder if that's happening, could be. It kind of has that look to it. But, there's not a ton of data. The other thing is that my contact on the show told me was that Laura got kind of a bad edit. Not terrible, but that they edited out a lot of Laura's softer side, her nice side. When I was watching her story, I figured there was a soft, vulnerable side to her because, of course, why would that not be there? But I didn't see any evidence of that until she was crying at the lake party. And then there it is. And I even highlighted it. It's like, that's what's going on for people, because she comes across as like a tough guy, And I'm not saying that even what was presented was 100% healthy. She seems to be, overly prickly at times, and that's an issue. But why would the editors edit out the nice parts? Well, what my contact said is either she knew this or she suspected, based on other actions of the editors, is that the show knew that Laura and Jeremy did not end up progressing through the series. And so the editors are thinking, well, we don't really need the audience to be rooting for this couple. So we don't need them to really like Laura. I think I'm extending based on what they were telling me, what my contact was telling me, that I'm guessing the editors are thinking, well, there's enough here that they're not going to like Jeremy to begin with. They probably know that. And if we show the well-rounded picture of Laura, then it'll look pretty lopsided. The audience will look at them and say, Jeremy is a problem and Laura is not. And I wonder if they're frequently trying to balance the scales, similar to how it looks as though the show is editing Clay's problems out. That's what my contact is saying, and it does kind of look that way. Because, according to my contact, Clay is presenting more of a problem, and AD is not. So if they showed a representative sample of what was happening, the audience would not be pulling for this couple, and it would make the relationship look untenable, very unhealthy. Similarly, if you had Jeremy that looks very bad and Laura that looks more well-rounded, then a similar thing will happen. And so they edit out the good stuff for Laura and they edit out the bad stuff for Clay, which I think is interesting. I mean, they've obviously created a very successful show, so they're doing something right, but it's not what I would prefer. I prefer just to see, it'd still be entertaining, perhaps more. It gets frustrating to be wondering how much I'm being manipulated. That's why I enjoy my contact so much, because it's like, like that scene with the soup thing. We see one scene with AD and Clay, and although they were fighting about that gym thing, it wasn't hostile. It wasn't particularly awkward or tense. The very next time we see them, I think it's that soup thing, and it was all sorts of awkward. And she's quietly just staring at him and rolling her eyes, and I'm thinking, what is happening? Maybe I didn't read AD right. Well, when I hear that they had a huge fight about her body image and that kind of stuff, maybe 2 fights, then I think, oh, well, they're still in that fight. She's at the tail end of that, So it's just good to know that. But it is interesting to think that the editors are frequently trying to make each couple that go to the altar in particular look similarly problemed. The other thing that my contacts, I asked about Johnny and Amy. I said, are they as awesome as they seem? And what she told me was, no dirt on Johnny or Amy. They are truly lovely humans and about as normal as you can get. In a good way, I'm guessing. But anyway, let's get back to the show.
In gazillion, quadrillion years would have thought that I would be here. The first of seven siblings to be getting married, and it's happening for me today.
I could be reading into it, but if she's the first of 7 siblings to get married, maybe she's one of the older siblings. She might be the youngest, who knows? But if she's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, then that's another potential indication of the precursors or the factors that could have led to her being identified by the system to be the parentified child, the codependent one. I don't know. Being the first, coming from a large family, even if you are the oldest, that doesn't necessarily mean you're parentified, obviously. But adding that to the list, I was wondering, I don't even know if we knew how many siblings she had, right? So you can see that, right? If there's stress on the family, if one or both of the parents are compromised in some way, sometimes it can just be health problems, sometimes it can be depression, sometimes it can be parental conflict, sometimes it can be financial difficulties, divorce, whatever. It's pretty common for the oldest children to have to make up. At least there's pressure on the oldest children to make up for the deficit. But if there was even more pressure, explicit pressure, and also rewarding of the oldest child or one of the older children to take care of the younger children, then it can really be the breeding ground for what I would call codependent personality disorder or codependent personality or overfunctioning, where the individual feels like that is their only worth. That's their only function. They don't even know how to focus on themselves because they were never allowed to explore that practice, that habit, or that neurological connections. You have to rinse and repeat that process over and over and over again as a child to get to know your emotions and your needs such that you can be able to act on them and try to meet them when necessary. It's hard enough even when you're being parented well. It's particularly hard if you're in a situation like that. So anyway, I don't know if I'm reading into it, but it is interesting.
You definitely deserve love. Like, I chose you, and that's why I'm here, for you to show me the way and just like always love me for who I actually am. Like, to me, that was the most validated thing I think I could have.
They're doing a recap of their story beats, and I'm reminded of just the theme in this relationship of between both of them. Their narrative is that he has problems and she loves him anyway, that he has problems and she helps him, that for him, he says, she makes me a better man. They often will say this on the show, so it's hard to know what that means exactly, but I'm always wondering what that means to people, because regardless of man, woman, whatever, you would think that you could just strive for being a good person, following your values, doing things that you feel are honorable or ethical or moral, whatever those morals are. And you just think that you'd be striving for that and you wouldn't need somebody else to facilitate that for you. Having said that, it takes a village, and even as for ourselves as adults, it takes a village for us. There's a lot of support and help and advice or feedback. But when I hear Clay say that, it just sounds like he's saying that AD makes him into a different person, which I don't know if that's what he's saying. That isn't really what he's saying. But if that's true, metaphorically or whatever way we put it, then the person that loves AD is the other person that is him. Sort of implies that there's another person there. There's a more natural state for him, right? I think about, the cheating and the staying in the relationship or being pro-social, or I don't know. Anyway, so there's that. But you definitely hear the vibe in their dynamic that it's not both directions. And I think watching it might be easy to detect, but even then, I felt like I was starting to buy into the imbalance where she is overfunctioning and he is underfunctioning, and that's just like a natural state, or it feels normal, or it feels like accepted that is just the way that it is. But in real life, it gets worse because in real life, you're not watching these little 10-minute clips every once in a while. You're living it day by day, no matter which side you're on, or you're observing it from the outside. And I've worked with clients and I've identified it, and it can be so hard to change. And it begins with even the individuals in the relationship, because it depends on them changing, that trying to convince them of what I am seeing can be very, very hard. Now, I can never know because it's just my clinical guess as to what's happening based on information. But so I would never say you're wrong for not accepting my conceptualization. Absolutely not. But it can be really hard because you're swimming in it and because it was everything that you were socialized into. Because if she was socialized to overfunction, then there's a pretty good chance he was socialized to underfunction. I don't know that, but that often is the case. There can be personalities or lifestyles or presentations where it just seems like, well, yeah, of course AD is the overfunctioner because she's more put together. And they're completely open about that perspective, but it's not both directions. When have we seen a scene where AD is the one that is vulnerable and saying, I need help with this, and he is the one that is taking care of her? He is the one that's making her into a better woman, I suppose. I don't like that. But, if there was reciprocity or balance or health or something, we would see that. There's nothing wrong with overfunctioning. It's just if it's inflexible and always, which if we just take a zoom out, that is the narrative, that he needs help and that she loves him regardless. And that's another aspect of overfunctioning and codependency. The style of it is that it's the love that a mother gives to her son. I think she's actually trying to make up for it. I don't know if it's conscious, but it could be. Your partner should not have that kind of love. You should not have that kind, especially in the beginning of a relationship. A mother, a parent, typically, not in all situations, but almost all the time, 99.9% of the time, regardless of, especially if it's a young child, regardless of what that child does, the parent will love that child and be there for that child. The child could be just completely horrible in their behavior, and the parent will still love and be there for that child. There's variations to this and exceptions to some extent, but you get what I'm saying. When you meet someone and you're dating or you're married even, that's not healthy because parents put themselves aside for the good of the child, right? Just at least to some extent. When we're in a relationship, that is not necessarily a healthy thing. It depends on what we mean by it, but you get what I'm saying, that AD should not consider herself locked in to that mother, unconditional, always there, regardless of what happens, love to Clay, especially if it's not reciprocated, right? Especially if he's not really in the relationship. Now, I don't know. We're building up to the wedding. I'm really curious if this is a Chelsea and Kwame thing, and we're going to get a yes. But I highly suspect, especially given what my contact has been telling me on the show, that, well, actually, I don't know. Maybe he will be a yes because of just how overwhelmingly loving she is to him. He might deep down really want that. So I'm just reminded of just how one-directional that love and unconditional love and care and help is.
But
Yeah.
But I got to tell you this, okay? A lot of what I was sharing with you guys, and with sincerity, I didn't get from my father. Because my father wasn't. He wasn't present. He wasn't present. He was doing his own thing.
I don't think I need to further my discussion of everything I've said before, but this highlights another data point. I didn't know if his father's father, Clay's father's father, was around or not, but at the very least, these kinds of relational traumas and parenting styles can tend to get passed down. Now, in a way, given the tiny little details we know about this family tree, it's possible that the grandfather, his father, was, it's hard to measure these things, but the most neglectful, shall we say, of his son, meaning Clay's father. And the father is better as a parent, better as a father than his own father, but wasn't everything that Clay needed, right? And that can happen. You can see those kinds of progressions one way or another. For y'all out there, some of you, I guess, you might know that you went through a lot as a child. Your parents had issues, and you might even worry about having kids yourself. That I don't want to give the message that somehow you're doomed. There's a lot of different things that can happen. There's a lot of different things you can do as a young parent or a prospective parent to heal and to get the support around you that you need so that you're much less likely to engage, regardless of, you could be raised perfectly and you still need all of that support and that self-awareness and therapy. But anyway, so we're hearing that detail, and so on one hand, we might be like, and I've said this before, like, how can you do that if you're Clay's father? How do you drag him repeatedly on these infidelity trips? Or what did my contact say that the way Clay worded it? Infidelity trips. We don't know how often they happened, but it sounds like it was multiple times, if not often. And we knew that Clay was told, or it was implied that Clay couldn't tell his mom. Clay today would say that he still hasn't told his mom doesn't know all the things that happened. I was saying, how as a parent do you do that? How could he do that to Clay? Well, it's quite possible that Clay's father worked really hard in his way to parent Clay in a much better fashion than he was ever parented himself. And so we would say that is commendable and applaudable for sure. And yet there was still issues, right? Do we just let the father completely off the hook? I don't even know what the hook is exactly. It just is how it is. Most parents do the best that they can. They try. And people are left to their own devices a lot. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of difficulty, a lot of conflict in relation. It's hard. So for Clay, given that he is given an opportunity and maybe he's done a lot of work himself, well, like, we might look at Clay and have some ideas about what's really happening and about his behavior. Apparently, according to my contact, a lot of Clay's worst behavior was edited out. So we don't know if that's true, but if that is, then we might make it a certain picture in our mind. Not that the behavior was atrocious, but it was in the direction that we already saw. It was just more of that, more body shaming, more insulting behavior to AD, that kind of stuff. Anyway, we could hold all that in our minds and know that my contact is also saying he's been in therapy after the show. That's not a panacea. It just is what it is. But we can hold all that in our mind, and we can look at some of the good qualities. I've pointed out a lot of the good. I've seen some very strong, healthy behavior from Clay in this series, and I've been pointing it out. So we can hold all that in our mind, and in isolation, we would look at Clay and say, jerk face overall. I wouldn't say that, but maybe some people would. But in relation to the generations that we are seeing, at least with the fathers, there's a lot of other people involved, mothers and blah, blah, blah. If we just look at that progression, it's possible that we would actually give 2 thumbs up to Clay. We would give 2 thumbs up to the father, maybe even 2 thumbs up to the grandfather, given what he went through. We don't know. That's the world that I live in, is that I don't take people in isolation. I don't just look at someone. And that's why I'm always wanting at least a little bit of data to grab onto. Of course, I can't extrapolate much. I know enough to know that I can't, but at least it gives me something to think about, something to speculate on, something to hold on to, rather than just being in the abyss. Like on 90 Day Fiancé, often they don't give us any information. They're starting to give more, which in my fantasy world, they watch this channel occasionally and are starting to pay attention. I'm sure that's not true, but either way, I do appreciate that. But anyway, so yeah, interesting.
And this process has bring a lot of truth to me. And it's just tough to look yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm causing a lot of issues in my life. I'm causing a lot of stress in my life. I believe that me being married would be great for me. And
Yeah, every time I give up on Clay, it could be, him just faking this sentiment or something. But it doesn't seem like, particularly this time, it doesn't seem like it. I don't know. But if it is authentic, at least halfway, there's so much health there. There's so much potential there. I see the seed of something that I think has been growing through this. Now, you could say that he even went on the show actually from a previous seed that he had. It's just like, well, maybe I need something to kind of pull me out of my pattern. He's referring to, I haven't been showing all the scenes, but I think he thinks of himself as this, I don't know, this Lone Ranger kind of a thing, where he had to distance himself and protect himself, and he leans into his strengths, which might be his charm, his looks or something, and he gets self-esteem through that and contact through that, some attachment. Some people will do that. They will seemingly come across culturally as a player or something, but what they're doing is they're preserving a little bit of safety for themselves while actually having contact with people, while having a little bit of safe attachment and vulnerability and intimacy, whether it's physical or otherwise. But there's always a distance because they're terrified. The narrative about those people is that they want their cake and eat it too or something, or that they're just using women or they're just using partners. And yeah, you can make a case for that, but that assumes that humans in general, if they could, would live that lifestyle. Some people, I think, are operating from that assumption that men, if they could get away with it, they would live that lifestyle. And certainly some people, regardless of gender, that's what they want, and they're prevented from society or themselves or something from doing that. But the vast majority of people want attachment. Now, what does that attachment look like? Is it a polyamorous thing? Is it a friendship? Is it a marriage? There's a lot of different manifestations of attachment. It doesn't have to look one particular way, but generally speaking, most people want a best friend. They want a close soulmate type of partner. They want a close relationship with their children, with their parents, intimacy, vulnerability, dependency, loyalty, dedication, safety, understanding. They want those things. It's possible that underneath all that, what he would call suave or ego or whatever, he discovered that a long time ago, that there's something there. And he said a few things like he didn't say this phrase, but he was kind of saying that he's been denying his own needs. Now, I still think he's going to be no at the altar, but this overall process could have helped him. I want to comment, though, on what he just said, so I'm going to rewind it because I think it does play into what I was saying earlier.
A lot of issues in my life. I'm causing a lot of stress in my life. I believe that me being married would be great for me.
Right, so I think that is the operating narrative for both AD and Clay, that Clay needs AD to be functional, to be healthy. Otherwise, he will go down roads that will be overall self-destructive or something. And AD is here for that unconditional, codependent love, putting herself aside to save him. Yeah. Therapists are known for being saviors. Prior to being therapists, a lot of people, because once you become a therapist, you're actually working ethically with clients. You're not saving them, but you are in a position where you can actually help them. And it'll satisfy that urge, that codependent urge. Now, of course, we have to work on that because codependency isn't a good thing. But the motivation to help others, that part of codependency can be a good thing, right? But for a lot of therapists, what they'll report is prior to working with clients, they will have a history of being an overfunctioner, of being codependent and trying to save their partners, being attracted to people like that, struggling with that sort of thing, feeling neglected often, that sort of thing, because the function of this relationship is not reciprocal. It's one directional for the most part. So the way he says that, it'd be a good thing for me to get married. Like, it'd be a good thing for me to floss. It would be a good thing for me to eat my vegetables. It would be a good thing for me to get married. It has that feel to it. Not, I want to build a life together and there's mutual love and respect and alternating taking care of each other, that kind of thing. And AD seems to be in that direction too. It's less explicit in her language, and it's possible that left to her own devices, she wouldn't be as much that way, but he really pulls her into that. It's another thing to, a lot of times people think, well, overfunctioners, they're doing something. No, almost all the time, particularly in a situation like this where we see the mirror image of this for each other, they're both coercing and socializing the other person into that position. They both want and need that. The underfunctioner wants to underfunction. That's important to know. The overfunctioner wants to overfunction. We often think about overfunctioners as the driver of the bus, and certainly they can be, particularly if they're controlling. But often the underfunctioner, if they weren't with that particular overfunctioner, they would find another overfunctioner to be with. And they will send a lot of signals that keep the overfunction, because the overfunctioner sometimes, especially if there's some flexibility there, which I think there might be for AD, the overfunctioner will feel threatened when the overfunctioner stops overfunctioning temporarily, and they'll start to sabotage sometimes subconsciously, often subconsciously, to pull the other person in, right? So I don't know, but the way he words that, it would be good for me to get married.
And although people would say, don't let your past dictate your future, the man he is, I'm a lot like my dad.
This thing called life.
The other thing that Clay mentioned that I want to comment on is that he was saying that he appeared to be saying there's a dichotomy for men, where I guess it'd kind of be like the Madonna whore thing, but a version for men. It's like the gigolo priest, I guess. And in that he seems to think you're either a player, in my old man language, a player, or you're this perfect stand-up guy who always follows through and is a family man and denies his more primal urges or natural urges or male urges. I think he kind of frames it that way. It wouldn't be unusual for someone in our society to frame it that way. And that he doesn't, what he said was, I don't hear a lot of men talking about how to navigate that, which, if I understand right, that's pretty advanced thinking, given where I think he's been. On his own, he has, in going on this show, has really helped him to identify that. In the past, he might have looked at the stand-up guys as chumps, right, or weak, or they don't have game, so they're not playing. And now that he's doing that, and also he recognizes, like, I want someone to guide me on this. My dad didn't, and I don't have men around. Remember in the beginning he was talking about all my role models, all these guys that I look up to, all the famous guys I look up to, and all my friends, like, they all seem to be in that player mode. None of them are people I would go to for advice or to guide me, help me understand what's happening for me. And, life is a journey, but the very short thing I would explore with him is that dichotomy. That's nonsensical. It's not based, certainly not how I see the world. You can have a totally other option, or blend the two, or vacillate between the two in a way that is in sync with your values and not harmful to other people. You don't have to choose. And both sides have good aspects to it. And it's possible that he's never heard something like that. He's never heard that his player ego side, that he those are the words, he doesn't use the word player, but he uses the word ego, the suave side, he uses that word, the side that his dad represents. There's a possibility that no one has ever said there are good aspects to that side of you. There are good aspects to your dad regarding that. Let's go through that. That's what I do for myself and what I do with clients is don't reject the whole thing. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's go through the qualities, for yourself. You can think about your own parents. If you had a complicated relationship with your parents, you might want to just completely reject everything that is them. But that can create a lot of all or nothingness about it. You can look at your parents, and even though a lot of what they did you didn't appreciate and you don't want to follow in their footsteps, there might be things about them that you actually value, and you might be following it yourself anyway. And that gives volition for yourself. Instead of just doing everything your parents say or doing everything your parents don't say, you're in the driver's seat. You're saying, I like that. I don't like that. I like that. I like a little bit of that. I don't like that. But I might call upon that if I need it. And I love that. And I hate that. You're shopping. You're deciding, who am I? What values do I want to have? What examples do I want to follow? What internalizations have I already internalized? Do I want to enhance, and which do I want to diminish? You're not starting from scratch. You're a fully fledged human that is figuring out your way. Because for some people, given their parenting, they feel like they have to start over. They have to start from scratch, and they feel like they're constantly caught up, and that's not true. So he seems to be really at the precipice of something, that he's just a wide open door for a good mentor to come in, perhaps his therapist, someone that doesn't tell him what to do or have a bunch of pontifications towards him, but someone that challenges in a helpful way. When he says that dichotomy and the mentor just says, well, what I'm hearing is this dichotomy, let's question that. Is that the way you want to see it? Is that reality? Because you don't have to see it that way. Maybe everyone around you sees it that way, but that's a choice that you make. It's similar to other kinds of aspects that we grow up with. For me, I'm reminded of masculinity, that often in the paternalistic mainstream world, everything about a man, everything that's associated with men and masculinity is a good thing. Independence, strong, lack of emotion, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, honorable, don't take no shit from no one, striving for economic success, achievement, competition, whatever. And the assumption is that all that is good, and all the opposites, the women things, are bad. Emotions, listening to people, cooperation, weakness. Okay. Now, we've had a lot of people over really potentially centuries, but at the very least the past 120 years, a lot of feminists, a lot of philosophers, a lot of people in my field, evaluating that and identifying, that's not a good thing. There's so many bad things that come from that. And so we start developing terms like toxic masculinity. And then in my field, we talk about it, we write about it, we think about it, we apply it, we research it, read literature about it. Then the general public hears it. Maybe a journalist hears a little tidbit from the ivory tower, and they characterize toxic masculinity as comprising of all masculinity. That masculinity is toxic. But no, of course not. There are toxic elements to masculinity. And it's hard to talk about. Whenever I talk about it, I will almost always get backlash, people telling me that it's not healthy for me to be proud or to adhere to masculine notions or masculine traits and behaviors that are associated with masculinity. Because for me to say, I have done that sifting and continue to do that sifting between what is good about masculinity and what is bad. And we could say, well, why even adhere to any socialized model? Why not just say human goodness or human things that we are sifting through? And I do that as well. And that's primarily how I think. But I do think of myself as a man, and I do think of myself as masculine. You could argue that I only think that because of how I was socialized. Okay. I don't have a big reason to discard that entirely. So if all that is true, then what do I mean by adhering and identifying as a masculine man? Then I have to think about that. I have to really evaluate it. I have to really mull it over and test it out, get feedback, and identifying with things like being true to your word and trying to help others. Like if my wife is having trouble with, I don't know, some appliance or something, I consider it my job to notice that before she even tells me, really, and ask her if she wants me to fix it or just fix it. I take on all the appliance, even though my wife is just as smart as I am and can Google anything just like I can. It's my job. And we, I think, have that kind of arrangement. You know, there's things that she does that we've, I guess, decided based on identity or just divvying up the jobs that she does and I do less of, that kind of thing. Anyway, so now people will say, what are you saying, that women can't fix appliances? No. Now, if my wife really wanted to fix appliances and wanted me to take a passenger seat in that, then I'm flexible on that. I'm not inflexible. But if I can get that kind of enjoyment, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm in line with my identity, which we all are allowed to pursue as long as it doesn't harm other people, right? So we can all do that. There's a shadow side, a toxic side to that, like putting my wife down, telling her, oh, you broke the thing again, or oh, women, they're so bad with appliances, or whatever it is. It's the toxic side. But the positive side is I just fix it, and it makes me feel good. You could argue it makes me feel a little bit overall better when I fix the appliance than if my wife were to fix the appliance. You know what I'm saying? And in the grand scheme of life, let me have my little jolly. Unless you really want that jolly, then I'm fine with it, So, like, another thing is when we go out to dinner, I'm the one that quote unquote pays, but it's our money. So I'm not paying. And if she wanted to, hand over the credit card, then I'd be fine with it, of course. But I think for the two of us, those little things, that we were socialized to do, it's in line with our identity. If it was rigid or if I controlled the money, then that would be the toxic side of it. But on the positive side, I get to feel like, I don't know what I feel like when all I'm doing is handing the credit card. I guess I'm having some control over it, or I'm signaling or something, which I don't really care. I mean, I guess I care a little bit about because I've been indoctrinated, but yeah, that's I think that one's just habit, honestly. Because the fixing of the appliances, I do feel that kind of gratification. It feels very good when I can fix those kinds of things, when I can address those kinds of things. And there's a lot, when you live in a house, there's always something that's happening. I mean, we had an ant infestation that was pretty incredible. Now, I didn't fix it entirely. I tried to. It didn't really work. But I called the exterminator, and I worked with the exterminator, and I managed the home remedy that the exterminator, but I didn't really fix it. But, when I fixed it, I felt great, and I felt like I'm in my identity. I'm in the flow of who I am, Same as identify as a therapist. And when I'm yammering on YouTube, I'm in that flow. I identify as a therapist that tries to help others. And when I'm a therapist, when I'm a professor, when I'm a YouTuber, I'm in that identity and I'm living those values. And it makes me feel better. I'm not displacing anybody else, It's not inflexible, but, all that is part of it. You hear me making all these, justifications for, in my world, for a man to say that he's proud to be a man in a certain way. It is often associated with a lot of horribleness, right? A lot of sexism and misogyny. But that doesn't mean we just throw out all of positive masculinity. So for Clay, he really seems like it's, he's just, all the elements are there. And I just really hope that he just capitalizes on that and continues with it, regardless of what happens here. I have tremendous faith in him, given what I have seen. I do absolutely believe it. We could fast forward the clock 5-10 years and he could be one of the wisest, most balanced, most healthy, most self-aware person on the planet. He has that potential, you know. So I hope that's happening. Okay, well, let's adjourn there. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.